Let's take whatever. 2 and 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Wisdom Blueprint. I'm Michael Norman, and my good sidekick here, Sebastian. We're so glad to have you here, man. It's always exciting to have you in the studios because you tend to always stimulate my deeper consciousness.
Well, it's exciting to be here as always, and I really hope we get some really good talks today, as usual.
As usual. You know, there's so many things going on in the world today. So many, like, you got Russia just decide we're just going to take your land, okay? And we're going to annex it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Fortunately, the global community are seemingly coming together to say, hey, listen, that's just not how things are done, you know. But these are the antics and the attributes, I think, of authoritarian, dictatorship. What do you think?
On a global level?
On a mental level.
On a mental level. How so?
Yeah, because, they say that every, dictator, authoritarian, in terms of their personality traits, they tend to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Narcissistic?
Narcissistic. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because again, what other personality trait can see that it's just to just go into a sovereign nation,
right?
And then on the heels of retreat, decide, by the way, we're annexing your country, even though we're on the retreat.
Right.
So what kind of mindset does that take?
Well, I think you're right about it having to have some psychological traits. As a matter of fact, there has been some studies that talk about how every previous leader or every dictator or anyone in power has had very specific psychological or personality characteristics, right?
Their profile.
That define them. And it's interesting. I think I'm not sure if it was Socrates or someone who said that power corrupts by definition, right? Mm-hmm. Because to even want to pursue power, you already have to have certain predispositions. You have to have certain agenda. You have to have a certain agenda and a certain personality that comes with that, like you're talking about. Yeah, mm-hmm. I mean, narcissism, definitely a whole lot of greed. Maybe not so much greed, but kind of like an unyielding ambition for more, right?
Yeah.
So that's what Plato tried to accomplish in his Republic, was create a government where not the greedy who want power would lead, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. But the wise would lead. And one of his quotes was, the cost of not leading yourself is being led by someone less worthy than you, right? So
that's good right there.
Yeah.
The cost of not leading yourself is being led by someone more unworthy than you.
Unworthy, unqualified to lead, right? And what he was trying to do with this was make people realize that, even though the people that should be in power, those who are wise and kind and caring,
right,
and those people aren't even interested in achieving power, right? That's the flaw of the world, that the only people who even go out of their way to pursue that political authority are probably the people that shouldn't, right?
Yeah. So it almost I guess, assumes and presumes that most people at levels of power, it's kind of an outworking of an inner mindset,
Exactly. And I mean, for all of human history, and even in a lot of animals and their culture, there is a hierarchy where the ones on top it's the same psychological traits or the same characteristics that you see in the people who are on top in our hierarchies. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. It's always the aggressive. There's certain psychological words for that. That there's been studies for. I think it's conscientiousness is low in them. They there's things like that. I'm not too familiar with the traits right now. But what's interesting is the same traits on all levels, whether there's any kind of social interactions, the animals, the humans, it's the same set of traits, right?
Interesting.
Which might work in the animal kingdom for the strong to lead and, whatever, right?
That is kind of how the animal kingdom works, right?
Exactly, right. But my question is, does that work just as well in a civilization of humans where, well, not only do you have to be strong, but you have to be smart. And in being smart, you also realize that, wow, what comes with power is tremendous.
But you know, being smart comes in various flavors.
Right.
The-
And
you
they
know
could
what I
take
mean?
advantage of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. And to assume that their wittiness and their intelligence would be used, you know, their powers for good, but they're just as crafty and they're, dare I say, intellectual dictators and masochists that are out there that, you know, are equal in intelligence.
Right.
I was just watching Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know, you know, that kind of spooked me out. But
Yeah.
Did you see it?
No, not yet. But I did see it's been getting popular on Netflix.
Yeah, it's
recently.
getting a lot of airplay. But the point I was making, trying to, I guess the whole reason I even tuned in is try to kind of get into the mind of someone of that type of personality.
Right.
I would think Hitler, Mussolini, Napoleon, Bonaparte. Most people don't know that he had similar character traits and
Right.
you know, activities in his regime. He wasn't slow about killing folks and was no big deal. You know,
Right.
if you get in the way, sucks to be you.
And that's a kind of mindset that's reflected in all leaders. You know, you just don't see it on our sides of history, right? Because, you know, the victors write history and stuff. But really, from a personality perspective, if you were to analyze the psychological traits of all the people you just mentioned, even some of our modern leaders today, you know, if you were to compare Hitler with man, I mean, just about any other political leader, the personalities are likely very, very similar. Churchill, that's another one, right?
Churchill,
Winston Churchill.
really?
Well,
In terms of, you know, this kind of authoritarian.
Well, what you have to realize is, imagine all these leaders just being a template, right? And the only thing that varies between them is, well, their agendas and their countries and their situations, right?
Right.
I mean, you know, flip the positions of Winston and Hitler, right? And I mean, you know, the same thing would have carried out, except, you know, Hitler would have been the good guy and Winston would have been the bad guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And well, that raises an interesting question, right? And of course, we view everything that happened in Germany in that time as a horrible thing, right? Well, if they had won the war, how would we have looked, for example, right? The victors always write history.
Right. And you know, is that a real thing, or is that an accepted idea that victors write history? I mean, I'm sure they contribute to history. Do they have total autonomy over history?
Well, who's left to write history? You know, I mean, you know, you can go back to our earliest history of conflict and war, right? When one state would win or triumph over another, right? There was no one left to write for that state.
But yeah, because they were in slavery.
Well, yeah, among other things.
Yeah,
but I mean,
or
the first,
killed off.
yeah. The first thing that they would do was, assume power. I mean, how do you? And it's an interesting thing. How do you take over a country? I mean, the people of that country can just stand up against you.
You would think,
right?
yeah.
You're right. I mean, for example, Russia's taking over Ukraine right now, right? Well, I mean, they're taking over the land, but the Ukrainians are still there. Why don't they just do something about it, right? It's like that. It's like a simple way of thinking, but why? Well, because those countries, what do? They have to write the history. They have to change the perspective of the people. The first thing that they do is they change the power and put themselves in those positions, right? Obviously. What's up?
Go ahead.
So, do the victors write history? I would say absolutely, and it's a very difficult thing to argue against. We only really see that perspective, right? They've already been demonized, and even Germany at the time, it was demonized and it was brought to its knees to the point where, I mean, obviously today, Germany is nothing like it was back then, right? So, in the presence of the victors, Germany had to stand down and completely change and admit that it was wrong the whole time. Admit that it was wrong. It happened twice. World War I, Germany had to take the blame for it, right? And then came World War II. They had to take the blame for it again, right? So, do the victors write history? I would absolutely say so. And I think throughout history, we miss out on a lot of different things that might have been true.
Right. You're right. And I suspect, of course, if you're the ruling party, the ruling personality, that you do have that privilege, I guess,
Right.
to to write the books, because obviously the books are being rewritten even as we speak, and we're in a quote unquote democracy.
Right.
So history is a very interesting thing in and of itself, as we interpret it, how we look at it, and how it's been presented to us.
Right.
So, but the whole, again, getting back to the hunger and thirst for power and control, where does that kind of emanate from? This need to have people subservient to you?
Well, I definitely think it comes from our nature as early humans, as parts of, well, we used to be part of the animal kingdom, right? Prior to our development as a society and everything else. I mean, we were, and it blows my mind when people don't view humans the way I do. I mean, I look at us and I think, how could you not see us as simply intelligent animals that have emerged and attempted to separate ourselves from nature, right? Mm-hmm. When so much of our characteristics in our daily lives, in our social lives, in our politics are direct reflections or root so directly from what we see in animal social interactions, right? Mm-hmm. Where does that hunger for power come from, right? What's the difference between the alpha wolf and our political leaders, right? The biggest difference is the fact that there's so much more to gain in a world with all these imaginary things. There's money, right? There's that influence, that power, that control, borders, political power, diplomatic power, all these things. There's more to gain, right? Mm-hmm. But it stems from that same hierarchy that exists in every stage of mammalian nature.
Yeah, well, we had this discussion a few shows back about, how we said that we were talking about how now in the beginning when we had a common goal, a common need, in terms of how to protect ourselves from the elements, from the rain, from volcanoes, and et cetera, how to protect ourselves from the animal kingdom, and once we figured that out, while we were figuring that out, we were unified and we had a certain unity and a congeniality there because we had all things in common. I guess the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that sort of thing. But once we figured out how to protect ourselves from the elements, how to protect ourselves from wildlife, and how to provide food and shelter, then it seems as though that's when we turned on each other.
Yeah, that's definitely a point of history when that started to happen.
When you start talking about, I'm just saying in terms of, can we all get along? That the world is one big family, that we're all interrelated at some level. You're a part of me, I'm a part of you. Right. To the extent that it would eliminate, thievery, murder, and all the other negative human behavior that goes on a daily basis.
Is it possible? Well, I mean, it's something so, and it's kind of sad to think that it's so far-fetched, right? At least in our point of history, and it's been for every point of history in humanity. But I recently read a book called The Three-Body Problem, right? Which kind of tackles that same idea. It was written, one of the protagonists is a Chinese girl, right? Whose parents were killed in the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And she starts to wonder if it's possible for humanity to even get along. And she loses faith in humanity completely when she sees everyone turn against each other. Her closest friends turn against her, turn her into the government. Her own mother turn against her father and get him killed and whatnot. So she wonders, right? And then she realizes that, I mean, for us to achieve peace or tranquility on a global level, right, it would be like trying to, and this is an exact quote from the book, it would be as if trying to lift ourselves from the ground by pulling up on our hair, right? Mm-hmm. And what she means by that is doing it on our own seems impossible, right? We were unified once before in history when we were against nature, when we had to resist the forces of nature, right? Right. She says that the only time where that would be possible again is if there was an outside force, like, aliens or something like that.
Or 9/11. We just saw that.
But even in 9/11, right? What was unified was the Western ideology world, right?
Right. Well, that was a little myopic, but the whole concept of, America divided, we come together.
Exactly.
When we were attacked and that sort of thing.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, at least among the nations that were against, well, I mean, the majority of the world is against terrorism, right? Terrorism is just one, idea amongst everything else. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when we have a common enemy, it becomes simple. But I mean, it's that in itself is a little bit tragic, that we only find peace in war with something else, right?
That's an interesting paradox.
Yeah, that is an interesting.
that it is war that brings us together and
Right.
makes us where we otherwise are warring against each other, but a common enemy makes us buddies, and
Exactly.
we find some sort of some sort of relativity there that we can then, on whatever level, able to get along, and as long as we have the same enemy.
Right. Why do you think that is? That I mean, and I would wager that if you were to, let's take away humans from the intelligent world for a moment. Let's pretend that we weren't the ones to achieve that level of intelligence first. I would wager that if you were to, give wolves the level or dogs the level of intelligence that humans have, right, that they would end up the same way. I don't think any of their social structure would be very much different, right? Because they're still tied down to the same nature that makes us the way we are.
Right.
Why do you think that we only find peace or unity in conflict with something else? Why must there always be that element of conflict for us to find any kind of unity?
And herein lies the mystery, because this is not a recent phenomenon.
No, this is since the beginning of time, since the beginning of life on Earth.
Yeah, and being a pastor and having this religious background, I have to defer to the idea, that there is a evil force we call the devil that's at work, and it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where once Eve threw Adam under the bus, or Adam threw Eve under the bus. Somebody, God comes to Adam and says, "Hey, where are you?" And they're hiding, and he's like, "Did you guys eat the fruit I told you not to eat, the tree I told you not to eat from?" And then, of course, Adam throws her under the bus, and then he questions her. She throws him under the bus. So I would even think, that looking a little deeper, that propensity for discord, disagreement,
Self-interest.
yeah,
Right? The self-interest of Adam and Eve.
yeah, it's
right?
kind of baked into human existence. Seems to be.
Oh, I think it's definitely built into all existence. I mean, I like to say, in nature, in the wilderness, and everything, even today in modern society, right? We try to ignore the fact, but it's a tragic reality that you got to look out for yourself. And when worse comes to worse, you will look out for yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you simply will. It's very rare to find instances in nature where that's not the case, right? Where you throw someone under the bus, especially. I mean, I like to view a lot of those stories in their metaphorical importance, right?
Right.
And I think what the metaphor there is, despite them being the only two humans on Earth, they still